Texas, 1943. The train slowed through prairie land so flat it made the sky feel infinite, heat rising in waves that bent the horizon into liquid shimmer. Inside cattle cars marked POW, 40 German soldiers pressed faces against slats, watching America pass in stunned silence. They had been told this country was starving, that Roosevelt's propaganda machine hid desperate masses from the world. Yet farmland stretched endless, cattle grazed thick across rolling hills, and grain silos stood tall as cathedrals. One man, Friedrich Weber, 24, a farmhand's son from Bavaria, whispered to the prisoner beside him, "They lied to us about everything." The Germans had surrendered 3 weeks earlier in North Africa. Rommel's Afrika Korps, once invincible, had crumbled under Montgomery's hammer at Tunisia. Friedrich, 24 years old, calloused hands that knew wheat harvests and rifle triggers equally, had watched British tanks roll through defensive lines like reapers through wheat. The surrender felt less like defeat than relief. No more thirst that made your tongue swell. No more dysentery that turned your insides to water. No more watching friends die face down in sand while flies gathered before the body stopped twitching. But relief carried fear beneath it, cold and constant as groundwater. They had been raised on stories that shaped reality more than reality itself. The Americans were savage cowboys who lynched prisoners for sport, strung them up from cottonwood trees and left them for vultures. The British starved POWs in camps worse than Dachau, fed them sawdust bread and dishwater soup until their ribs showed through skin like xylophone keys. Every Hitler Youth meeting, every Wehrmacht briefing, every Völkischer Beobachter headline reinforced the same message with the repetition of religious catechism. Surrender meant torture, starvation, death. Friedrich had believed it. They all had. Belief was easier than doubt, when doubt meant questioning everything. Your leaders, your country, your entire reason for being in a desert 3,000 miles from home. Friedrich expected cruelty. Instead, he found fried chicken. From Tunisia, they sailed to Norfolk, Virginia. The Atlantic crossing took 16 days aboard a Liberty ship converted to prisoner transport. Below deck, the Germans huddled in cargo holds that smelled of machine oil and vomit, seasick and terrified, waiting for the brutality to begin. It didn't come. Red Cross officials distributed blankets, real wool blankets, not the thin cotton rags the Wehrmacht issued. American sailors shared cigarettes through the bars, Camels and Lucky Strikes that tasted rich and smooth after years of German Frontkämpfer cigarettes that burned your throat like chemical warfare. One young guard from Oklahoma, couldn't have been more than 19, freckled face and gap-toothed smile, showed Friedrich photographs of his farm. "My daddy grows winter wheat outside Tulsa," the guard said, grinning with the unself-conscious openness that Friedrich would learn was distinctly American. "You folks grow wheat back home?" Friedrich nodded, too stunned to form English words. His own father grew winter wheat in Bavaria. Same crop, same season. Same back-breaking harvest work that left your muscles screaming and your hands bleeding through gloves. The guard pulled a Hershey bar from his pocket, broke it in half with a snap that sounded impossibly loud in the metal hold, passed a piece through the bars. "Welcome to America, buddy. Hope you like it here." Chocolate. Real chocolate. Friedrich hadn't tasted it since Christmas 1941, before the Russian front, before North Africa, before the world became sand and blood and the constant metallic taste of fear. He ate slowly, letting it melt on his tongue, and felt something crack inside his chest. Some wall propaganda had built brick by brick, year by year, lie by lie. The chocolate tasted like proof. Proof that the enemy wasn't starving. Proof that American soldiers could afford to give away luxuries to prisoners. Proof that everything Goebbels said about Anglo-American weakness was horseshit. At night, lying in the hammock that swayed with the ship's roll, Friedrich listened to other prisoners whisper in darkness. "They're fattening us up," Klaus Hoffmann said. Klaus was a baker from Hamburg, 32 years old, thick around the middle even after months of desert rations. "Like geese for Christmas, make us comfortable, then slaughter us." "Why would they feed us at all if they plan to kill us?" Otto Strauss asked. Otto was an officer's son from Berlin, 23, with the sharp features and hard eyes of someone raised on Nazi ideology, like mother's milk. Bullets are cheaper than chocolate. Psychological torture, Klaus insisted. Give us hope, then take it away. Break our spirits. But Friedrich wondered. He'd seen how the guards acted, casual, almost friendly, like they were transporting livestock to market rather than enemies to execution. He'd watched American sailors joke and laugh during their shifts, heard them sing while they worked. If these men hated Germans, they hid it remarkably well. The ship rolled. Waves crashed against the hull with a rhythm like breathing, and Friedrich stared at the riveted metal ceiling, feeling his certainty dissolve like sugar in rain. They docked at Norfolk in late May 1943. Humidity hung thick as wool, air sweet with honeysuckle and salt and something else. Prosperity, maybe, though Friedrich didn't have a word for the smell of a nation that hadn't been bombed, starved, or bled white by total war. The POWs shuffled down gangplanks onto American soil for the first time, blinking in sunlight that felt different somehow. Brighter, more abundant, like even the sun knew this land had plenty to spare. Friedrich's legs shook after 16 days at sea. Solid ground felt strange, too stable, like walking on a world that had forgotten how to tremble. Norfolk bustled. Cranes loaded ships. Trucks rumbled past carrying supplies. Sailors shouted orders. And everywhere, Friedrich saw abundance that made his throat tight with something between awe and despair. Mountains of supplies stacked on docks. Crates marked beef and flour and sugar, piled high as houses. New trucks gleaming in morning sun. Fresh paint on buildings. Fat seagulls fighting over garbage that contained more nutrition than Wehrmacht field rations. Hans Becker, the tank driver from Dresden, 20 years old, built like a bull with a neck thick as a tree trunk, stood beside Friedrich, staring at the docks with his mouth open. Jesus Christ, Hans whispered in German. Look at it all. Just look at it. Friedrich looked, and saw the war's outcome written in stacked crates and idle abundance. Germany was fighting with everything it had. Every scrap of metal, every calorie of food, every drop of fuel rationed and recycled and wrung dry. America was fighting with its pocket change. From Norfolk, they were placed on trains. Not cattle cars this time, but passenger coaches with cushioned seats and windows that actually opened. The Germans sat in stunned silence, running hands over upholstery that was cleaner than anything they'd touched in years. Guards walked the aisles offering water from metal canteens, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, real ham, real cheese, real bread that wasn't stretched with sawdust or ground acorns. The guards joked about steaks waiting at camp, about baseball games and Hollywood movies on Saturday nights. Friedrich assumed it was mockery, psychological torture designed to break their spirits before the real punishment began. Then the landscape changed, and Friedrich stopped thinking about torture entirely. Virginia's green hills gave way to Tennessee mountains that rose like cathedral walls, forests so thick they looked black in the distance. Then Arkansas flatlands, cotton fields stretching white to the horizon. Then Texas, endless Texas, plains that made Bavaria look like a postage stamp, sky so wide it hurt to comprehend. Friedrich pressed his face against glass, watching America reveal itself mile by mile, and felt his understanding of the world fundamentally shift. Dust devils danced across highways like spirits. Oil derricks pumped rhythmic as heartbeats, black blood of the earth fueling the war machine that would crush Germany like an ant under a boot. Small towns flickered past. White churches with tall steeples, red barns bigger than German village halls, children waving from porches without fear or hatred, just curious about the train passing through. Everything was bigger here. The land, the sky, the barns, the cars parked in driveways. Even the people looked bigger, healthier, better fed. It's obscene, Otto muttered, staring out the window with something like religious fervor curdling into nausea. This excess, this waste, no nation should have this much. But Klaus, the baker who understood scarcity in his bones, saw it differently. They're not hoarding it, he said quietly. Look at the towns, everyone has plenty. Not just the rich. Everyone. It was true. The small Texas towns they passed showed prosperity spread broad rather than concentrated. Every house had a car, every yard had grass, every main street had shops with full windows. Not Berlin's stark divide between party elite and everyone else. Not the grinding poverty Friedrich remembered from childhood, when his family ate potato soup 6 days a week, and meat on Sundays if they were lucky. This was something else entirely. This was what happened when a nation had so much land, so much oil, so much industrial capacity that prosperity became background radiation. Invisible, constant, everywhere at once. The train rolled through afternoon heat. Cattle grazed in fields. Farmhouses stood solid and prosperous, and Friedrich felt propaganda's last foundations crumble inside him like sandcastles in tide. Germany couldn't win this war. Germany had never been able to win this war. The industrial mismatch wasn't close. It was laughable, tragic, a cruel joke played on boys who'd believed in thousand-year Reichs and Aryan destiny. Hans leaned close, voice low so guards wouldn't hear. We were told America was weak, decadent, soft from luxury and racial mixing. They lied, Friedrich said. About what? Friedrich gestured at the window, at endless America rolling past. Everything. The train stopped at a siding near Hearne, Texas, a town of 3,000 souls 90 miles north of Houston, closer to nowhere than anywhere. The heat hit like opening an oven door. June in central Texas felt like standing on the sun's surface, air so thick you could chew it, humidity that soaked through clothes in seconds and stayed there, permanent as sweat. Friedrich stepped onto the platform and almost fell. His legs trembled, his head swam. 3 weeks of travel, fear, cognitive dissonance, and insufficient sleep crashed over him in a wave that left him dizzy. A guard caught his elbow, gentle, steadying. Easy there, partner. Heat'll get you if you ain't used to it. Come on, let's get you boys some shade and water. Partner. The guard called him partner. Like they were colleagues. Like Friedrich was human. Camp Hearne sprawled across 400 acres of former farmland. Guard towers rose above double barbed wire fences, but the towers looked perfunctory somehow, like theater sets rather than fortifications. Wooden barracks stood in neat rows, each painted army green, each identical as factory products. But the prisoners noticed details immediately. Windows with screens, not bars. Roofs in good repair. A baseball diamond beyond the wire. And the smell. God almighty. The smell drifting from the mess hall made Friedrich's stomach clench with sudden violent hunger that bordered on pain. Meat. Frying meat. Not the smell of horse meat or mystery sausages the Wehrmacht served. Real meat. Beef. Pork. And something else. Something that made saliva flood Friedrich's mouth until he had to swallow hard or drool like a dog. The camp commandant, Colonel Ira Summers, addressed them in the parade ground. He was 53, a First World War veteran who'd seen Belleau Wood and carried that war's weight in his eyes like stones in deep water. His voice carried the flat, practical drawl of rural Texas. Vowels stretched long, consonants soft as worn leather. You men are prisoners of the United States Army, he said, standing at ease in the shade of an oak tree older than Texas itself. You'll be treated according to the Geneva Convention. That means decent food, decent quarters, medical care when needed. You'll work. Farms around here need hands, and we'll put you to use. You'll earn wages, 80 cents a day in camp scrip. You'll follow rules. Do all that and we'll get along fine. He paused, mopping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. I fought Germans in France in 1918, Colonel Summers continued. Good soldiers, brave men. This war ain't personal for me, and it shouldn't be for you either. We're professionals doing our jobs. I expect you'll act like professionals, and I promise you'll be treated like professionals. Questions? No threats, no cruelty, no speeches about Aryan inferiority or enemy subhumans. Just matter-of-fact instruction delivered in afternoon heat, while cicadas screamed from distant oaks like they were being murdered. Friedrich glanced at Otto, whose face had gone pale beneath his tan. Otto had been told Americans were mongrels, race-mixed degenerates incapable of military discipline or honor. Colonel Summers, Ramrod straight, calm-voiced, commanding without aggression, demolished that lie in 90 seconds. That evening, they lined up for their first meal. The mess hall smelled like heaven, if heaven were made of animal fat and paprika. Friedrich shuffled through the line, metal tray rattling in his hands, watching American cooks pile food onto plates with shocking, almost offensive generosity. Mashed potatoes, real potatoes, not turnips or beets disguised as potatoes. Green beans shining with butter. White bread, 2 slices with more butter on the side. And chicken. Golden brown fried chicken pieces that glistened under fluorescent lights, skin crackling crisp, steam rising in fragrant clouds that made Friedrich's eyes water. He stared. His brain couldn't process what his eyes reported. This had to be officers' food, or propaganda, or a dream fever spawned from heat and exhaustion. Behind him, Klaus whispered in German, "This is a trick. They'll poison us, or photograph us eating while Germans starve. Use it for propaganda. They'll show fat prisoners gorging while the fatherland suffers." But the smell. Sweet Jesus. The smell made Friedrich's mouth flood with saliva until he had to swallow convulsively, made his hands shake so badly the tray rattled like machine gun fire, made 3 years of war rations and North African deprivation crash over him in a single overwhelming wave of physical need. The cook, a black corporal named James Washington, 32 years old, from Greenwood, Mississippi, smiled and dropped 2 pieces of chicken onto Friedrich's tray with metal tongs. Big pieces, breast and thigh, meat hanging off the bones like wealth. "Plenty more where that came from," Corporal Washington said, still smiling that warm, gap-toothed smile that reached his eyes. "You boys eat up. Growing men need protein." Friedrich's English was poor, but he understood the tone. Kindness, not pity, not contempt, just simple human kindness, cook to diner, professional pride in his work. Friedrich carried his tray to a long table, sat among other Germans who stared at their plates with identical expressions of disbelief and suspicion. No one ate. They waited for orders, for guards to explain the trick, for the camera crew to emerge and reveal the propaganda operation, for something, anything, that made sense within the reality they'd been taught. Then Hans Becker, the tank driver from Dresden, 20 years old, built like a bull, picked up a chicken leg, bit into it, and his face transformed. His eyes widened until white showed all around the irises. His jaw stopped mid-chew. His expression shifted through shock, disbelief, recognition, grief, and ecstasy in the space of 3 seconds. Tears carved sudden lines down dust-stained cheeks, leaving tracks that looked like scars. "Mein Gott," he whispered, voice breaking. "Das ist köstlich." This is delicious. The German word, köstlich, carried weight English couldn't match. Not just tasty, but precious, valuable, something worthy of reverence and preservation and memory. Something your grandmother made on special occasions. Something that meant home and safety and a world before war. Hans took another bite, chewing slowly now, deliberately, like he was trying to memorize the experience molecule by molecule. His shoulders shook. Tears fell faster, dripping onto his tray, mixing with grease and salt. "Es schmeckt wie zu Hause," Hans sobbed. "It tastes like home." Others began eating. The mess hall filled with sounds Friedrich hadn't heard in years. Men moaning with pleasure, exclaiming in German, laughing through tears. Klaus Hoffmann bit into chicken and pressed his eyes shut, shoulders shaking, making sounds halfway between laughter and weeping. Otto Strauss, the Nazi true believer, the officer's son who'd volunteered for the Africa Corps to prove Aryan superiority, ate so fast he choked, had to be pounded on the back by an American guard who was laughing not cruel laughter, but warm, paternal amused. "Slow down there, partner," the guard said, still thumping Otto's back. "Ain't nobody gonna take it from you. This ain't Deutschland. We got plenty." We got plenty. 3 words that destroyed an ideology. Friedrich lifted a piece to his mouth. The skin crackled between his teeth like autumn leaves. Juice and fat exploded across his tongue, flooding his mouth with flavors so intense they felt like violence. The meat pulled tender from the bone, seasoned with salt and pepper and something else. Paprika, maybe, or cayenne, or some secret Mississippi spice blend passed down through generations of kitchens where grandmothers ruled like queens. He closed his eyes and saw his mother's kitchen in Bavaria, Sunday dinners before the war. His father at the head of the table, still strong, before the first war broke him. His sisters laughing. The world when it still made sense, when the future stretched bright and promising, before Nazis and death camps and desert wars that killed boys for ideas that turned out to be lies. And he wept. Not from sadness, from relief, from the sudden crushing realization that he'd been lied to about everything that mattered. The Americans weren't savages. They weren't starving. They weren't weak or decadent or inferior. They had so much abundance, so much fundamental, incomprehensible plenty, that they could feed their enemies better than the Wehrmacht fed its own soldiers. The chicken was cooked by a black man, a Negro, as the Germans said, a member of the inferior race that Nazi ideology placed barely above Jews in the hierarchy of human worth. But Corporal Washington's fried chicken was the best thing Friedrich had eaten in his entire life. Better than his mother's cooking. Better than the officer's mess in basic training. Better than anything the master race had ever fed him. The meal demolished propaganda more thoroughly than any bomb or bullet. Because you cannot sustain hate when someone feeds you with kindness. You cannot maintain beliefs about racial superiority when an inferior cook demonstrates skill and generosity that shames everything your superior nation provided. Friedrich ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling ideology crack and crumble like old plaster. Around him, 40 German soldiers, farmers and bakers and factory workers who'd worn Wehrmacht gray, who'd believed in thousand-year Reichs and Aryan destiny, ate American fried chicken and discovered they'd been lied to about the most fundamental truths. That night, lying in his bunk in a barracks cooler and cleaner than anywhere he'd slept in 3 years, Friedrich stared at ceiling rafters while June heat pressed down like a blanket. Fans turned lazy circles overhead, moving air that smelled of pine disinfectant and fresh paint. Around him, other men whispered in darkness. "Did you taste the bread?" someone said. "Real white flour, not sawdust, not potato starch, real wheat flour." "The butter was real," another voice, thick with emotion. "Not margarine, not some chemical substitute, real butter from real cows. Tomorrow they said there's bacon for breakfast. Bacon and eggs, real eggs, 2 per man." Silence stretched like wire, then Klaus Hoffmann's voice, thick and rough. "We're not going home, are we? Even if Germany somehow wins, we're not going home. Not really." No one answered, because everyone knew the truth now, tasted it in fried chicken and butter and white bread. You didn't feed prisoners like this if you were losing. You didn't waste real chicken and butter and eggs on enemy soldiers if your own people were starving. The meal had revealed what propaganda couldn't hide. America's industrial might, its agricultural dominance, its fundamental terrifying abundance. Germany was doomed, had always been doomed. The war was over. They just hadn't finished dying yet. By midsummer, the Germans at Camp Hearne had settled into strange routine that felt less like imprisonment than peculiar hospitality. They woke at 6 to reveille, stood for morning count, then marched to breakfast in formation that became sloppier and more relaxed as weeks passed and guards stopped caring about military precision. They worked in surrounding cotton fields, earning 80 cents per day in camp scrip that could buy toiletries, cigarettes, and sundries from the camp canteen. The work was hard. Texas heat made North Africa feel temperate, but farmers treated them fairly, gave them water breaks, shared lunches sometimes. Some even invited prisoners to supper after work, sat them at family tables, served them food and conversation like honored guests rather than enemies. In the evenings, they played soccer in the field beyond the wire. They attended English classes taught by local teachers who volunteered because they believed education could defeat Nazism better than bullets. Some Germans joined Baptist church services on Sundays, drawn by hymns that sounded like German folk songs, by ministers who preached love and forgiveness without mentioning nationality or race. And they ate. God, how they ate. Fried chicken became a weekly tradition. Every Wednesday, Corporal Washington prepared his grandmother's recipe. He brined the chicken overnight in buttermilk mixed with hot sauce and black pepper, dredged pieces in flour seasoned with salt, garlic powder, paprika, and cayenne, then fried them in cast-iron skillets filled with lard heated to precisely 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The Germans lined up early every Wednesday, anticipating Chicken Day like Christmas. They traded cigarettes for the chance to get pieces fresh from the fryer, crispy hot and glistening. They developed favorites. Hans always wanted the breast, Klaus preferred thighs. Friedrich loved the wings because you could eat them slowly, make the experience last. Some wrote letters home, carefully worded to pass censors, describing the adequate rations they received. Others, like Friedrich, stopped writing entirely. How could you explain to starving families in bombed-out cities that you were eating better as a prisoner than you'd eaten in your entire life? How could you tell your mother that enemy soldiers fed you with more care than your own nation showed? The cognitive dissonance broke men in ways combat never had. Otto Strauss, the officer's son, had a mental collapse in late July. He'd been a true believer, Hitler youth leader since age 12, early Nazi party member, volunteer for the Afrika Korps, because he wanted to prove Aryan superiority on the battlefield. He'd believed in the racial science, the Lebensraum theories, the fundamental rightness of German dominance. Then he ate American fried chicken prepared by a black corporal from Mississippi, served by guards who treated him with casual dignity, in a camp where abundance flowed like water, and kindness seemed reflexive rather than calculated. His worldview shattered. The camp chaplain, Father Michael O'Brien, 48 years old, Irish Catholic from Boston, veteran of the Philippines campaign in the First World War, found Otto in the chapel one evening, staring at the cross with hollow eyes. The chapel was a simple wooden building, unpainted pine that smelled of resin and furniture polish. Sunlight slanted through windows, catching dust motes that drifted like souls. Otto sat in the front pew, motionless as stone. "I don't understand," Otto whispered when Father O'Brien sat beside him. His English had improved dramatically in 6 weeks, like he'd been absorbing the language through his skin. "We were told they hate us, told they would torture us, that Negroes were subhuman, incapable of culture or skill." His voice cracked. "But Corporal Washington's chicken is better than anything I've ever eaten. He smiles when he serves food, takes pride in his work, shows more grace than any German officer I ever met." He turned to Father O'Brien, eyes wet. "Why? Why do they feed us so well? Why do they treat us like humans when we came here to destroy them?" Father O'Brien was quiet for a long moment, choosing words carefully. "Because we believe people can change," he said finally. "Even enemies, especially enemies. Christ taught love for enemies, not just friends. It's easy to love friends. Takes grace to love people who want you dead." "I wanted you dead," Otto said. 6 months ago I would have killed you without hesitation, would have felt proud doing it. I know. How can you sit next to me? Because you're not that person anymore." Father O'Brien smiled, sad and warm. "Fried chicken defeated Nazism in your heart better than any bullet could. Food does that. Breaks down walls. Hard to hate someone who feeds you with care." Later, in his report to the War Department, Father O'Brien wrote, "The most effective anti-Nazi propaganda is a full stomach and human kindness. These men arrived as fanatics. Many will leave as friends. I recommend we continue this policy with all POWs. Generosity is not weakness, it is our greatest weapon." Camp Hearne was not unique. Across America, 425,000 German POWs lived in 511 camps, scattered from Texas to Wisconsin to Maine. The U.S. Army followed Geneva Convention rules religiously, not from kindness alone, but cold calculation. American soldiers were prisoners in Germany and Japan. Treat German POWs well, document that treatment, and maybe Germany would reciprocate. But something unexpected happened, something military planners hadn't anticipated. The POWs experienced American abundance firsthand. They ate better than most American civilians because military rations prioritized protein and calories. They received medical care that surpassed what Wehrmacht soldiers received at the front: dentistry, antibiotics, surgery performed by skilled doctors rather than exhausted medics. They worked alongside American farmers and factory workers, thousands of chicken pieces, served every breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the same quiet professionalism his grandmother taught him. Feed people good food, treat them with respect, let the meal do the talking. He never knew how many lives he'd changed. Never realized that his fried chicken, crispy skin and tender meat, seasoned with Mississippi tradition and cooked with care, had done more to defeat Nazism than strategic bombing or tank divisions. But he'd done what his grandmother taught, fed people with respect, changed hearts through the fundamental act of nourishment offered without hatred. The buses pulled away, carrying former prisoners toward ships and planes in the long journey home. Friedrich Weber pressed his face against the window one last time, watching Camp Hearne recede into Texas flatland, the guard towers and barracks and mess hall growing smaller until distance swallowed them whole. But he could still taste it, would always taste it. The moment fried chicken broke through propaganda and revealed truth, that America's greatest weapon wasn't military might or industrial capacity, though it had both in crushing, incomprehensible abundance. America's greatest weapon was the simple revolutionary belief that even enemies deserved to eat well, that even Nazis could change if you fed them with grace. None of them realized it yet, standing in that mess hall in June 1943, tears streaming down faces as they ate fried chicken and wept for reasons they couldn't articulate. But that meal defeated Nazism more thoroughly than any battle, because you cannot sustain hate when someone feeds you with kindness. You cannot maintain propaganda when reality tastes this good. You cannot hold on to ideology when grace proves more powerful than cruelty. The war would continue for 2 more years. Millions more would die in battles and camps and bombed cities. But in a mess hall in Texas, over plates of golden fried chicken prepared by a Mississippi cook who smiled while he served, a small group of German soldiers learned the truth that would eventually rebuild the world. The enemy is not always evil. Abundance is not weakness, and sometimes the most powerful weapon is just a good meal offered freely to men who expected nothing but cruelty.